This past weekend brought a sci-fi marathon at a local college. This is a very popular time for people to take psychedelics and stare at aliens for 12 hours. I decided it would be a good time to try AMT. I'd heard about its 6-hour peak and its 24 to 26 hours overall experience, so I was excited to spend most of the marathon tripping. I ate 45 mg AMT at 8 p.m. Shortly after eating a small amount of couscous. Remember, eat Maui-friendly foods. At around 8:30 p.m. I went to the marathon to watch movies while I came up. I felt slight hints of what was to come, mostly bodily anxiety, around 9:15 p.m. I had heard that AMT's second hour was unpleasant and I was starting to feel a little cold, so I went to a friend's room and chilled there for a while as the AMT was taking effect. I began to feel better around 11:45 p.m. and decided that I was going to be tripping soon, so I grabbed a blanket and set out for the marathon. At 12:10 p.m. I entered the room, not tripping at all. By the time I'd walked across the back of the room to meet my friends, about 15 seconds, I was tripping my balls off. This was to continue for the next 13 hours. The trip was almost purely visual. I felt like I was thinking very normally and I wasn't experiencing any oral effects, as I do with most other drugs I've tried. But I was being saturated by strong tryptamine visuals the entire time. There was a speedy effect. I was constantly wringing my hands, which felt a little like MDMA hands in the first 3 hours of the peak, and fidgeting. There were also jaw clenches that put those eye experiences on MDA to shame, and my pupils were enormous. I noticed a sense of time warping. Before I knew it, 1 or 2 hours had passed. Since there was no mindfuck about AMT, the marathon was only marginally interesting, and so I spent a lot of time elsewhere. Around 5 a.m. I went to join my friends at their dorm. Most of them had taken some ass-whooping LSD and were coming down, and a handful of them had taken some 2CT7 and were still flying. I smoked a few bowls with people, and noticed very little synergy between AMT and marijuana, although it's still delightful. By 7 a.m. I noticed the visuals diminishing, and by 8 a.m. they were getting faint. Around 11 a.m. I went to my girlfriend's room to sleep, and proceeded to fidget and toss and turn and eventually resign myself to the fact that I was going to be awake for a little longer. I put some good music on, quietly, and eventually dozed off for a couple of hours around 3 p.m. I awoke at 5 p.m. with a slight headache and IH, but other than that I felt fine. I took some ibuprofen and set out for home to make dinner, and I slept very well that night. Conclusions. AMT was much less intellectual, i.e., not at all, than I would have liked, but it was fun. It felt like a pure, strong version of the tryptamine signature you read about here. I'd never been able to put my finger on it, but after experiencing 13 hours of it, I think I can do so now. I'm not anxious to do it again, but it was a fun way to spend a weekend. PSO. Make sure you have some bazooka gum or a teething ring or something. 2000